Now, let me turn you now to the 55th chapter of Isaiah. My ways are higher than your ways, and my thoughts than yours. This is the chapter where you're told, my word shall not return unto me void, but it must accomplish that which I purpose and prosper in the thing for which I sent it. So my ways are higher than your ways. Don't concern yourself with how it's going to be done. For the same voice who spoke these words said this in the 32nd chapter of Deuteronomy, the 39th verse. I, even I, am he. I kill, I make alive. I wound, I heal. I do all these things, and none can deliver out of my hand. He's playing all the parts. And if one is basically inclined to steal, he will use it to produce the necessary means to get the money to put on the roof. So she comes home and there was a robbery. All the things have been replaced with new ones and better ones as she desired them. At the moment it seemed to be a shock, but she set the whole thing up in motion, for she's the one who spoke those words. I kill and I make alive. I wound and I heal. And none can deliver out of my hands. For the Spirit of God and the human imagination are one. And there is nothing but God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. And so if all things are made by him, is there a thief in the world? He's playing that part. Is there a so-called hero in the world? He's playing that part. A coward? He's playing that part. He's playing every part in the world, and it all adds up to produce the unseen imaginal acts of men. So you are alone, and you think no one sees me, and this means nothing. It's only my imagination. And you carry on your lovely imaginal act. And so that's it. Not knowing that you're actually producing tomorrow's effects in this world. And when it comes into the world, that natural effect has an unseen, invisible, imaginal act as cause, and not a natural cause. A natural cause only seen. It is a delusion. Delusion of what? Of your fading memory. You don't remember when you did it. So when confronted with your own harvest, you can't quite believe it. You can't remember when you did anything that could actually be like this. I didn't rob myself. I never thought for one moment of robbery to get the money. No, but I did see the whole thing done. And there are thieves in the world, all over the world, and they're all played by God. There is nothing but God. God only acts and is in existing beings or men. Now let me find that actor, because God only acts, and he is in all existing beings or men. Well, I'm a man. I've got to find that actor. For the thing that I see reflected in the mirror when I shave in the morning is a mask. That's persona. Now, who is wearing that mask? I answer, if you say, Neville, I turn around and I say, yes, here I am. But who is the being that is there? I am. That's my real name. But the mask is called Neville. But I will say, I am Neville. So the wearer of the mask called Neville responds. That being in that mask, behind that mask that no one sees, is God. And now the whole vast Christendom will celebrate this victory of God, that he actually died literally died. But God's first attribute is mercy. And God turned death into sleep. And then rose the sexes to work and to weep. And so all the sexes rose as mass. When God died, he buried himself in humanity and died. And then his first attribute, mercy, turned it into sleep. That's what Blake meant when he said eternity exists. And all things in eternity independent of creation, which was an act of mercy. That was the merciful act, to turn death into sleep. And God is dreaming this dream. One day he will awake. And when he awakes, he resurrects. And then he gathers into his own being all his scattered being. So all are gathered together. When I depart this time, may I tell you, I am taking everything in the universe with me. And when I am lifted up, I will raise all unto me. Read it in the 12th chapter of John. Not one can be left, because all things exist in the human imagination. But it's not raised up until he who is scattered is awakened to unity. And then he draws into his one being all that was scattered. So there's sin, his fall into division, and his resurrection to unity. His fall into the generation of decay and death, and his regeneration into the generation or the resurrection from the dead. So when he actually is raised from the dead, he gathers all into his own being, and they're all with him. No matter where he goes, he has his whole vast world raised up, hasn't left one behind him. But everyone shattered in the world will have a reproduction of that drama within themselves. So what is now being dramatized as a memorial this week, for this is really a memorial. This is simply a great memory, a remembrance of what God has already accomplished. And so they're perpetuating it through Good Friday, then comes the burial on Saturday, then comes the resurrection on Sunday. But the whole thing is done. It's all done. Only to be repeated in the individual, and then the individual, who is a semen scattered, becomes the unit, and he draws his vast world unto himself, and he is resurrected. So the one becomes the many, and then the many become the one. So whenever one is raised, he takes his whole vast world with him, even though it seems to be left behind. And every aspect that it seemingly is behind becomes the unit, and then it raises up. So one must be all. That is the story of the Christian mystery. One must be all. So the first cry on the cross, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. And they do not know what they do. They go blindly on under compulsion, executing the unseen imaginal acts of humanity. And they move under compulsion. To pick this up, I told the story. I was severely criticized for it by a lady at a dinner party one night when Fred Bales, who is now gone from this world, and he gave a party at the Ambassador Hotel. And I had told this story about 2 weeks before, and one of his great, I would say, contributors, who would come and always write huge big check at the end of a year or end of a month to keep that going. And she was most critical that night. As I said, I didn't feel well that night at all. And she said, I can't quite understand how you could take the platform, an audience of 2,600, 1,000 who could not get in, they're all overflowing, at the Fox Wilshire, and tell what you told concerning your wife. That was my first wife. I told a simple story to explain that everything in this world must be forgiven. I don't care what it is. When I met the girl who now bears my name, who is the mother of my daughter, the very first moment I met her, I knew she is going to be my wife. She didn't know it, but I knew it. I said to myself, she doesn't know it, but she is going to be my wife. We sailed for Barbados 6 months later, and she met my mother, met my family, met them all. They all loved her. That was back in 1936. In New York City, because of some archaic law, it's now passed. You couldn't get a divorce unless she was insane for 7 years, or adultery, and that's all. The Orthodox Christian churches have sewed the whole thing up so that it made life miserable and made everything simply, a burden to all. When I met her, I had just such an entangled background. And here's New York City, the most archaic city in the world concerning its laws. I went to bed and slept as though I were happily married to the girl who now bears my name. I did not have any physical emotion with her. Just she was sleeping there and I am here, and it's blissful. I did that for 1 solid week. Then comes a telephone call from the court one morning, telling me that I must come down to this federal court on Tuesday morning. Well, I was groggy. It was early in the morning, and in those days I didn't rise as early as I do now. And so I just said, all right, and I hung up. After I hung up, I wondered, what on earth is all this nonsense? What have I done? I must be in court. I haven't received the summons. Not a thing. I must be in court. Well, on Tuesday morning that I'm supposed to be there, I made no effort to go there. And about 9:30, the phone rang. It's the court. And they say to me, you're supposed to be here in court this morning. You meet at 10. And I said, what on earth am I supposed to be in court for? They said, well, it happens that your wife is arrested. And we thought maybe you could throw some light on the reason for her arrest. That's why we asked you to come down. Well, I wasn't shaved. I simply threw myself into some clothes and off I went to a taxi down to the court. And I got there just as they were bringing her in. Man whispered into the 3 judges, 1 judge's ear, that I was in the audience. The judge asked me to take you don't have to swear, but will you please take the stand and throw some light on the behavior of your wife? She tells me you've been separated now for almost 14 years. I said, yes. Is it a religious reason why you've been separated? I said, no, none whatsoever. We knew we were wrong the very first day we got married. We knew it was completely a failure. But, right away. Then he read the case. She was picked up for shoplifting. They went to her home and found other things in her home. I said, what do you say for this? I said, as far as I'm concerned, I don't think that really she is a shoplifter. As far as I'm concerned, she just moved under compulsion, taking into consideration her age. She's 8 years my senior, and she's passing through a certain emotional state. And do be lenient. We have a son, and he lives with me. And I don't want anything to happen to his mother that would cast any shadow on his life. He is a wonderful boy. He is in my charge by law. He is in my home. lives with me, and I don't want anything to happen to her that in any way would reflect upon my son. The judge said, in all my years on the bench, I have heard no plea by one for another who has every reason in this world to get her committed, because that in any other state would be enough for what he wants, which is the divorce. And yet he pleads for her. He sentenced her to 6 months, and then on my plea he suspended it. She met me on the outside and said, Neville, that was a very decent thing to do. Give me my papers. She knew I was looking for them. And my dancing partner told her I was looking for her to serve the papers and therefore to be scarce and move out of New York City. So she did. But she had to commit the act, and they had to call me and ask me to throw light upon that. How could I condemn her? Who was the actual cause of her shoplifting? I slept as though I were blissfully married to the girl who now bears my name. And I had to get the evidence. I had to get some reason to bring the action. And here my wife actually gave me the papers. I said, I don't have the papers with me. She said, I'm driving home to your place right now, and you can give me the papers. That's illegal, to serve your own papers. But she drove up to my hotel where I lived. I went to my room, came down to the lobby, and gave her the papers. Did my own serving. Now that is an illegal thing in this world. But then I got my divorce in the city of New York, and I could marry the girl who now bears my name. And when I told that, I told it only to tell people of that one word, the first word on the cross, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. They're all moving under compulsion. And the unseen causation is hidden from the world. They do not know who is treading in the winepress. And I was treading in the winepress to be happily married to a girl who was not then engaged to me, because I couldn't be engaged to her under the circumstances. And then my wife behaved in such a manner that it made it real and natural for me to do what I did. How can I blame her? So the first word on the cross, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. They have to do what they do. I have to fall into division and fragment my being into the unnumbered parts called humanity, and then rise into unity and gather all my scattered members together and rise as God himself. That's the story. It is God who fell and God who rises. So I know from my own experience nothing dies. Those who have not had the experience here, all right, they're restored in a world that is terrestrial, just like this. And they continue their journey until that moment in time when they're resurrected. And resurrection is resurrection into unity. And the outpictured world, the whole vast universe, is himself pushed out, is gathered together then. And they move up. And I, when I am lifted up from the earth, I will draw all men unto me. See it? This is the mystery of which we speak here night after night. You're not some tiny little thing that's pushed out. You are the whole. One must be all. And the day will come, you will find that you really are the all. So not one person in the universe could be outside of you when you are resurrected. Because as you are raised up, you raise all with you. And each will have the experience of being raised up, and all, eventually, will be the one. And in that day, there shall be one. His name one, as we're told in Zechariah. But Blake tells it so beautifully in his dream of 9 nights, called Valor, or the 4 Zoes. And then he tells a story of the falling into division. And when they're all gathered together, this one man they call Jesus. And they in him and he in them live in perfect harmony in Eden, the land of life. For you are the Lord Jesus Christ, whose resurrection they're going to celebrate this coming Sunday. You tell that to the priest just Sabbath. Tell that to any minister. Because they are sound asleep. They do not know who the Lord Jesus Christ is. I tell you, the Lord Jesus Christ is buried in you. And he is your own wonderful human imagination. That's the Lord Jesus Christ. And when he is raised in you, you will raise all in this universe with you. That is the story. So I want to thank my friend for sharing with me her experience and being big enough to remember. If man could only remember the imaginal acts. She remembered when the roof needed repairs or a new one, and the cost was excessively high for them at the moment. She remembered her husband complaining about the pain the new shoes caused, the weight of the tape recorder, and then working on the machine, the sewing machine, and it was adequate, it was good, but she would like a new one. And then came out of the nowhere a robbery, and took all these movable objects. And then came the insurance that sent the check for $2,000 odd, that replaced all the movable objects and enough for the roof and much, much over. So she can actually say, forgive them, Father, those who took it. Did they not do her a favor? And yet they are thieves in their own eyes and thieves in the eyes of society. And they are. But you know who played the part? God. And you know who actually made them do what they did? The lady who wrote me the letter. Now she knows the words in that 32nd chapter of Deuteronomy. I, even I, am he, and there is no God beside me. I kill and I make alive. I wound and I heal. And there is none that can deliver out of my hand. No matter what happens, if we only had the memory, we could trace it to a forgotten imaginal act on our part.